Welcome back. The petrol price could soon hit 27 Rand a litre. There have been various proposals to mitigate the impact on consumers. But Cosatu is concerned the administration is not doing enough. It's questioning the lack of concrete proposals. Cosatu's Deputy Parliamentary Officer, Tony Ehrenreich, joins us now to discuss just this. Good morning, Mr. Ehrenreich, and thank you very much for your time. Now, you've raised concern at the absence of a concrete plan to mitigate the rise in fuel prices. Talk to me about this. What should exactly government be doing at this point?
Well, I think that everybody, including government, appreciates the fact that the rising cost of fuel is having a devastating effect on the economy. And so besides it contributing to the sluggish growth levels we have and our inability to create jobs, it's also having the effect of huge inflationary effects, because when petrol prices rise, all other costs increase, from basic foodstuff to people's transport to and from work and all other related costs. So there must be an urgent step. There must be measures from the side of government to address these challenges, and we don't see that at the moment. We have seen government put in place a measure that helps to mitigate the prices in the short term. The R1.50, I think that goes some way towards alleviating the increases. But at a systemic level, at the medium term and long term level, we haven't seen the kind of measures that ensures that we insulated against the volatility of global food and global fuel prices, especially in the light of the Ukraine-Russian conflict.
So as Cosatu, you're a Labour Federation, and you are championing the interests of the working class. You're an alliance partner of the African National Congress. They happen to be the ruling party. Have you perhaps put some sort of a plan on the table for them? Because we've heard from even the Minister of Finance saying they're really struggling as to how they could come up with some other ways to deal with that shortfall that they would have of around 90 billion if perhaps they were to continue with removing that fuel levy.
Well, in the short term, of course, there's going to be battles. But our biggest concern is that the longer term planning, appreciating the impact that rising fuel prices have across the economy and on people's living standards, that it's got to be a more measured, a more considered and a more planned approach. Let's take some of the elements that make up the food price. The first one, and one amongst the biggest ones, because 50% of the fuel price is effectively taxes. Many of them are important, but we've got to find a way to regulate that so that it's effective in dealing with the challenges that we have. So the first challenges we have is around the road accident fund. What we see there is an amount of money going from the cost of fuel into that fund. But that fund's benefits often don't get to the people who are suffering as a result of accidents. We see, unfortunately, some corrupt lawyers milking the system, and the 400 billion rand that we indebted there for is in large part to do with that. So that's got to be relooked at. There was a bill tabled in Parliament that must be speeded up, and we've got to regulate that effectively so that the beneficiaries benefit and not those milking the system. So that's one of the ways in which we can do it. And the second way is we've got to increase the transport system. PRASA's got to be fundamentally increased so that people can get onto the trains. The trains are fueled by electricity, and so hopefully we're able to mitigate the cost of fuel on that part of people's public transport. Related to that is issues, of course, of banning scrap metals so that we don't see the looting and just the breaking down of the public transport system. But those are the kind of long-term measures from the medium and the long term that government's got to look at. We don't see that in the short term. And so government has to take responsibility for the absence of a plan that ensures we can mitigate the fuel price increases on the domestic economy.
Surely the revival of the rail network is something that many would agree with, because trains are or have been cheaper. But when you talk about RAF, surely there'd be those that are opposed to that position of Cosatu to say do away with it for the mere fact that there's been corruption insofar as lawyers are concerned in claiming for people. It still serves a purpose, just perhaps they need to tighten a few loose ends and ensure that there's no corruption. Can you really say they would need to do away with it because of the corruption?
I agree with you, absolutely. It's not about doing away with it. The road accident fund is important. It provides an important service, so it must continue in principle. The form that it takes has to be relooked at, and here government legislation must come in to address that. The biggest concern is that there are some corrupt lawyers, and unfortunately we have a a booming corrupt epidemic in South Africa, and it's really amongst the wealthier classes in our society, the politicians, the big businessmen, the lawyers and others, not all of them, of course, but they are having a debilitating effect on the economy. And so we've got to react to that urgently. We can't have the concerns of some lawyers constraining our ability to put in place new laws around the road accident fund. So it must be maintained, the benefits must be maintained, but the looting of it by some lawyers, that's got to stop. So it's those kind of restructuring that we think is absolutely essential and that can address the problems at a systemic level. We've also got to look at the issue of deregulation. There's got to be competition at the point of the sale of petrol so that different pumps continue. Many of the owners of that garages are making fortunes because their profits are guaranteed, and yet we as consumers are not getting the benefit of that competition. So at that level, there's got to be competition introduced. There's an element of the wages that goes to the petrol attendants' wages, and that we believe we must keep in place, because part of the structural problem in the economy is that too much of the money is going to the wealthy, too little to the poor, and so we're unable to generate demand in the economy that both looks at building a more equitable and fairer growth trajectory in South Africa. So those are the kind of measures that speaks both to the immediate impact of fuel, but also how do we bring about an economy that serves the people of South Africa, not continues to serve the old elites of apartheid, and now with their cronies in government who's becoming as corrupt, some of them who's becoming some corrupt as those in business. But those are amongst the steps that we've got to take at a systemic level to make sure that we deal with the fuel price and grow the economy at the same time.
Then to your voices, Cosatu, in this era of high fuel prices and high food prices, I've noticed headlines of late making a distinction on which Cosatu is taking up the fight for fuel and food prices. KZN in particular, that Cosatu seems to be leading the charge currently. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. But when did it get to this point where the national leadership leaves it to provinces to decide on whether to act or not act on matters that in fact affect all workers in the country?
Just to set the record straight, the national leadership is absolutely committed to this fight around fuel pricing. In fact, to deal with all measures that have an inflationary impact that deprives members of their buying power, of their hard-earned cash. So that is a key part of Cosatu's program, and it is a key part of Cosatu's focus. Cosatu has, in fact, called for the immediate convening of a NEDLAC meeting so that business, government, and labor and the other social partners can engage on the matters related to fuel pricing. Some of our provinces are taking action sooner, but the others are coming on stream, and there is a national process to deal with putting in place measures to address the fuel price crisis and the impact thereof on the economy overall.
But I'm sure you've seen reports of KZN Cosatu. Headlines, KZN Cosatu breaks ranks with National. They have been taking it to the streets currently. What do you make of that? Is it a national position? Was there in fact a conversation to say provinces should see to finish? You decide individually where you want to take this protest beyond just us discussing it.
There is a national position. We've got to confront the issue of fuel prices. Some provinces, and KwaZulu-Natal is to be commended for coming out sooner than the others, but clearly this has an impact on all workers, and all of the labor movements in the country has got to come together, confront this with government and business so that we can address it. Different programs and different provinces roll out their activities differently, and that's part of the campaign against fuel pricing. So we're going to see countrywide action to pressure government to take urgent steps to deal with it. But part of the build-up to that is provinces taking some action to highlight the challenge and point some areas of solution that Cosatu has been putting on the table and that government has to react to.
You say they should be commended as KZN Cosatu for coming out sooner. But is there no danger here where you have provinces being singled out? Because in some instances they could be vilified by perhaps other sectors, be it business, where they're said to be the troublemakers in this instance, because you've got other provinces that are agitating for change but quietly. So is it not perhaps a problem where they could be vilified or singled out in this respect? And in as much as you're saying it's commendable what they've done, but are you not exposing them as a province where it needs to come from the top and trickle down?
I would like to confirm absolutely that the message and the campaign and the position of Cosatu is a national position supported by all its unions and the nearly 2 million members across the country. So that is something that's endorsed. This is not unique that we have programs of action that starts with activities in different provinces and even in different sectors of the economy. So in the past, we've seen the public sector take action on one day and then the manufacturing sectors. So of course, those who would want to critique our opposition to the growth trajectory and the economic benefits of South Africa and who it goes to, and that would be mainly those who benefit from it, they would have their criticism. But we don't think that there's anything unusual in the way that this program's unfolding, with some provinces taking action before others and some sectors taking action before others. But the fundamental message I think we should all take out of it is that there's a crisis with petrol pricing. It's knock-on effect into the economy. All labor unions are going to take action around it, and different parts of that labor movement is taking action at different times as part of a coordinated strategy to make sure we both highlight the challenges, but also force government and business to engage on finding practical solutions along the lines that Cosatu started to outline.
So what would you make of criticism, because some pundits have really been going in on Cosatu of late? What would you make of criticism that perhaps you have Cosatu nationally conflicted, where they're looking to please too many? They're looking to please their alliance partners, where they take a softer approach to some of the issues of concern when it comes to those closed meetings. And then when it comes to the workers, if workers are saying, we're not seeing you agitating, then they say there's an example of KZN. They've taken to the streets. So you please both, but you don't seem to be choosing a specific cohort, or perhaps to stick to the mandate of consistently serving the proletariat, that here it's your members that come first.
You're absolutely right in that the members come first. The structure of Cosatu is such that the members are able to influence national executive decisions through their affiliate organizations. And so that is the overriding priority of a labor movement, of Cosatu and of the other unions in South Africa. What we've got to do is to make sure that we remain focused on the fundamental issues. The fundamental issues here is transforming the economy, making sure that working families in South Africa have the same opportunities, the same benefits as the elites who benefited under apartheid. And it's that program that we can collaborate with many different actors on as we advance that. But when it comes down to brass tacks, the main decision that drives Cosatu's agenda is the interest of its members. And in the respect of fuel pricing, its knock-on effect on the economy, there's no dissent within Cosatu. We are at one, we're raising the issues, and a program is unfolding to solve the problems that we have that's a direct consequence of the challenges of fuel price increases.
And then just in closing, the world is changing. We're in the midst of a fourth industrial revolution. What we know, or what Cosatu used to know as the shop floor, where you would have your shop stewards, might not exist anymore. We could be having machines on the shop floor. Are you adequately prepared for this era?
I think that the world is changing. You're absolutely right. The fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, all of these things have been coming on for a while with incremental changes that have had impacts on both workers, way in which they work, but also the amount of jobs that's available. We've got to, as a society, make sure that mechanization, artificial intelligence, and changes in technology, that benefits society and benefits the workers. It can't be at the cost of workers. So it's about making sure that the regulations, the laws, the legislation ensures that workers and South African society as a whole continue to benefit as we make those structural changes. And that is an area that unions must be centrally involved in, defending their members' interests, but also making sure that as the world changes, it becomes a more fair and a more just world. It can't just change for the sense of changing. It's got to change for the better. And for that to happen, everybody's ambitions have got to be on the table, and we've got to find balanced solutions that speaks to the ambitions of all of our people.
Mr. Ehrenreich, thank you very much for indulging us. What an enriching conversation that was. Cosatu Deputy Parliamentary Officer Tony Ehrenreich.